Appalachia, a word that evokes a whole passel of reactions. Everything from beauty of a mountaintop to trailer parks, drugs, and about everything in between. The Appalachian Mountains are indeed the oldest mountains in the world. They once towered 30,000 feet into the air. They stretch from eastern Canada through 14 states all the way to Louisiana. The folks who live in these mountains have faced an unending number of tragic and just plain odd happenings that cry out for the telling. Hello, I'm Larry Bentley, and I was born and raised in these very mountains by a family who themselves were born, raised, and lived for generations in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. Come with me, and we'll take a look at some of the unending stories that come from within my beloved mountains, and we'll look through the eyes of an Appalachian at some outside the area as well. Welcome to Season 5 of Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend. Howdy, my good friends. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for stopping by. I've got my coffee here, black as a revenue or soul and hot as a soul and steel. Folks around the Appalachian Mountains will tell you that these old mountains, well, they tend to hold on to things. They hold on to the mist in the morning, catching it in them hollers where they just lays there real still. They hold on to the cool and the heat of August, and they hold on to their share of secrets too. They're keepers not just of the land, but of the things that we don't talk about in the daytime. If you go far enough back up in Shelton Laurel, deep in Madison County, North Carolina, you'll sure enough feel it. It'll be like a weight on your chest. Kind of like the eyes of the mountain that you can't see watching you from behind about every tree line you pass. Folks call that place Bloody Madison, and it ain't a name that they gave it out of pride either. That name was earned through gunpowder and feuds from the Civil War right up into the ballot box. Now check out our episode called Taken with a Dose of Salt, and you'll see what I mean by that. That county has history that'd make a preacher blush. But there's one ghost that walks them ridges a good bit heavier than all the rest. It was the summer of 1970 when a young woman with a future about as bright as a new penny came there trying to do some good. Her name was Nancy Morgan, and before she left the mountains, some darkness done reached out and took her. Call your mom and them, come around and gather here and have a sit down while I tell you her story. Now, it was 1970 and a whole different time. The world outside the mountains was pretty much on fire with the Vietnam protest and all. I remember it well. Folks were fed up with their young people being drafted and sent over to a war that we could have won and got over with real quick. Big talking heads in D.C. tried to run the whole thing out of the White House, which didn't have the political spine to just drop the hammer and get it done. And they wonder why us hillbillies stay in the mountains and want to be forgot about by any revenue or a bureaucrat walking around. We just like to be left alone, unless it's kinfolk or a neighbor or somebody. But there in Madison County, North Carolina, things moved at a speed like a mule train. People there were proud Appalachians, and you know us, we don't really take kindly to handouts, and we sure don't take kindly to bureaucrats telling us how to live. That's because we know that the hand of a bureaucrat comes with strings and you can't get untied from, and they'll yank 'em around you just to watch you squirm sometimes. Nancy Morgan was 24 years old and a federal funded worker. VISTA was what they called the program, Volunteers in Service to America. It was part of the government's so-called war on poverty, because they were dumb enough to think that though they could fix poor with a clipboard and a calendar. Now, Nancy was smart, though, and she had a heart big enough to fill a dairy barn. So she came down to help the folks in Shelton Laurel. She was teaching kids, helping folks fix up their home places, trying to bring a little light into the poor folks in need. Now, she wasn't from them parts. She was a flatlander born and raised up in New Jersey. But from what folks said, she did her best to fit in. She rented a little place and drove a beat-up government car, because they saved the nice cars for the bureaucrats that come to collect money and tell folks how to live. She worked pretty close with a local feller named Ed Morgan, who was no relation to her. She was a volunteer, which meant that she was down the totem pole a far piece when it came to how much of a rip that the government actually gave. They pretty much threw money at the folks and said, go out and spend it and just get out of my face, get on with it. All they wanted back was a list of names of people who received that help for future reference at a later date. Now, being tied to the bureaucrats that are coming into the mountains to help automatically made it a dangerous business for most of the volunteers. Most mountain folks didn't see a difference between volunteer and bureaucrat because the politicians running the county back then, well, let's just say they ran it like citizens were their hound dogs. Local government was even worse. They didn't take kindly to outsiders poking their nose in to local business. They believed that what was theirs, and the poor were there just a part of their furniture that they could kick around like they wanted to. Madison County in those days were, and for a long time before, was ran by what they called a boss system. It was a political machine, pure and simple. And the local bigwigs, they liked poor folks staying poor. That meant that they thought that they could buy votes with a sack or two of cornmeal or maybe a jug of moonshine. The way they saw it, a desperate man votes for the one who gives him the bread, not the one that gives him a sermon about dignity. So they needed desperate people staying desperate. Anybody coming around giving anybody else any idea that things could be better, well, that they may have had rights or that they deserved better, deserved a square deal maybe, well, that wasn't appreciated one bit. In fact, it just might not be tolerated at all. It was akin to taking a flat-nosed shovel to a big old hornet's nest. You can guess how that's going to turn out. Nancy wasn't scared, though, or if she was, she sure didn't act like it. She was actually fixing to leave. She'd done her time as a volunteer and was packing up to go back home and be with her fiancé. She was ready to start a new life. But, yeah, she might have been done with volunteering, but somebody sure enough wasn't done with her yet. It was in June. You know, when the air there and had that kind of cool, thick feel to it, when it laid down in them hollers real cool. That was when Nancy hadn't been seen for a few days. Now, I've said many times, folks in the mountains just keep to themselves. But they'd kind of got to know and like Nancy, so when she went missing, they noticed. She wasn't kind of just up and wander off. It was Ed Morgan, the fellow she'd been working with, that first went looking. He drove up toward Hot Springs, up a stretch of road near where she stayed, and off the right-hand side of the road, just sitting there, was her government car, one of them big old plain Jane 4-door jobs, like Plymouth Fury, I think it was. Now, you've seen them before. Now, what they found when they looked inside wasn't just a murder, it was an outright message. Now, Nancy was in the back seat, hog-tied. That means hands and feet bound together behind her back, for those of you who don't know what hog-tied means. It's how you tie up a hog before butchering. It was ugly as it was cruel, and she didn't go easy. Coroner said it was flat-out strangulation. But the way she was left, naked and bound all up like that, well, it was meant to shame her. It was meant to be a warning. It was meant to scare somebody else who thought that maybe they could come in them parts and change anything. It wasn't a robbery because all her things were there, her purse, her money, and all were there. It weren't no drifter just passing through either. That took planning. It was personal. To folks around them parts, it felt local, and it felt like pure hate. Word spread through the hollers faster than a brush fire. The word was that they done killed that Vista girl. People locked their doors. The other Vista volunteers were all terrified because Nancy wasn't the only one there. They knew deep in their bones that the eyes on them weren't friendly. When they knew the eyes belonged to the very people who were supposed to protect them. You'd think that when a federal worker gets killed, volunteer or not, the law would rain down hell fire. Well, sure enough, they came. The FBI suits showed up, fresh out of Quantico, trying to understand how things work in a dirt road. The State Bureau of Investigation showed up, too. They swarmed over Madison County like ants on a fresh dropped homemade piece of fudge. But you can't get blood from a turnip, and you can't get the truth out of anybody that's scared they might be next. The mountain folk clammed up like a mussel shell. Now, see, the high sheriff back then didn't just enforce the law, he was the law. Some folks say he wrote it as he went, and it was always to his advantage. There was whispers from the ridges that Nancy knew too much about the local boss system. Maybe she knew some vote buying or seen some vote buying with that government money they're supposed to be having. Maybe she saw where the moonshine money was going, and Madison County, well, there's always moonshine. Or maybe she just made the right man think she did, which is just about as dangerous as actually knowing. The investigation was a mess from the get-go. In the mountains, we handle our own. You don't talk to revenuers, and if you did, well, you just might end up in a car off the side of the road, too. Oh, they had suspects, and they had names. There was a local boy, kind of a rough character, who bragged about it when he was into a jug, but then he'd sober up and deny it all. He was, as they say, available as a suspect. There were other rumors, too. Rumors of a jealous wife. Maybe she got too close to somebody important. Rumors of a political hit. A warning from the powers that be. But months turned into years. The FBI packed up the briefcases and went back to Washington. Papers stopped printing headlines, and Nancy Morgan's file just gathered dust in a drawer somewhere in Raleigh. And the trail went cold as a winter creek. It's been over 55 years now. 55 years that the girl's been gone. Most of the men who were in charge back then are dead and buried. The old sheriff is gone, too. Suspects are gone, but the story ain't gone. It's built into the dirt of Madison County, a foundation of sorrow. Now, if you drive through Hot Springs today, it's different. Tourists come for the mineral water. Hikers walk the Appalachian Trail. It's a beautiful place, and they've tried hard to forget about the bad times. But if you stop an old timer, one of them guys that's got the dirt under his fingernails, and you ask him about Nancy, well, they'll look away. They'll look toward that ridge, and they'll get real quiet. First, we failed that girl. That's the God's honest truth. She came to help, and we let darkness take her. Some say her spirit still wanders that stretch of road trying to find her way back home. It seems like justice was always scarce in the mountains through many a year. I reckon the good Lord done sorted out the guilty by now, but down here on this earth, it's just another cold case. A shadow in the history books. Nancy Morgan, now they speak her name so the wind won't carry it off. And that's the story of Nancy Morgan. If you have any information regarding the death of Nancy Morgan, please contact the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. Sometimes justice just needs a little bit of help from the living. I hope you got something out of our story today. If you did, please rate and review the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, or Rumble, throw us a like, and don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you watch or listen. Come on over to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend Podcast Group on Facebook, where we talk Appalachian or about anything else you want to talk about. I'll be back real soon with another Appalachian murder, mystery, or legend, and I will see you then.